They were already laughing when he stood up. Not loudly, not all at once. Just enough to let him know they had noticed him and dismissed him in the same breath. The room was full, but he felt like the only person standing. Rows of padded chairs, polished desks arranged in a half-circle, nameplates facing outward like shields. Every seat that mattered was taken. Every face that mattered was turned away. He cleared his throat once, quietly. "My name is—" The microphone cut out. Not with a sharp pop, just a soft click followed by silence. The man at the center desk didn't look up right away. He was flipping through papers, slow and deliberate, as if time itself belonged to him. When he finally raised his head, his eyes passed over the room once, then landed on the man standing alone near the aisle. His expression didn't change, but something in the room did. "Yes," the man said flatly. "Are you lost?" A few people smiled. Someone near the back let out a short breath through their nose. Not quite a laugh. Close enough. The man standing, Miguel Alvarez, 34 years old, tightened his grip on the folder in his hands. It wasn't thick, just a few papers. The corners were worn from being taken out and put back in too many times. "No," Miguel said. His voice came out steady, even though his throat felt dry. "I'm here to speak. I was listed on the agenda." The man at the center desk leaned back in his chair. He didn't check the agenda. He didn't need to. This session, he said slowly, is reserved for registered stakeholders and official representatives. Miguel nodded once. "I understand. That's why I'm here." That was when the laughter came. This time it didn't bother pretending. A woman 2 seats down glanced at him, then at the man beside her, raising her eyebrows as if to say, "Can you believe this?" Another man shifted in his chair and looked away, already bored. Miguel felt it then, the familiar sensation of becoming invisible while still standing in plain sight. "I'm the designated representative," Miguel said, "for the Alvarez Workers' Fund." The man at the center desk paused. For the first time, he looked directly at Miguel. Really looked. He took in the jacket, clean but old, the scuffed boots, the hands that didn't belong to someone who spent their days behind a desk. "The Alvarez Fund," the man repeated. "That fund was created 23 years ago." "Yes," Miguel said. "My father helped create it." That earned him a longer look, not curious, evaluating. "Sir," the man said, his tone shifting just enough to sound patient. "This is not the place for personal stories." Miguel didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. "This isn't personal," he said. "This is about a vote you're taking today." A few heads turned. Someone glanced at the large screen mounted on the wall. The agenda was already displayed. Near the bottom, in small text, was an item most people had ignored. "Final vote dissolution of the Alvarez Workers' Fund." Miguel followed their eyes. He'd been staring at that line for days. "If you proceed with that vote," Miguel said, "the fund will be closed permanently." "Yes," the man at the center desk replied. "That is correct. And the workers who paid into it will be handled according to policy," the man interrupted. "This has already been reviewed." Miguel felt heat rise in his chest, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm asking to speak before the vote." The man sighed, not in frustration, in inconvenience. "This council has already allotted time for public comment," he said. "That period has ended." Miguel glanced at the clock mounted above the chamber doors. 3 minutes ago. "I arrived early," Miguel said. "I was told to wait." "By whom?" the man asked. Miguel hesitated for half a second. "I don't know his name." That was enough. The man leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Then I'm afraid there's nothing further to discuss." A hand went up behind him. One of the council members, younger, neatly dressed, smiled faintly. "Mr. Chair," she said, "perhaps we should let him finish. It won't take long." The chair didn't look at her. "This fund," he said, "has not had an active representative in over a decade." Miguel's jaw tightened. "That's not true." The chair's eyes flicked back to him. "Oh, I've submitted paperwork every year," Miguel said. "I have copies." He lifted the folder slightly, not waving it. Just enough to show it existed. The chair didn't look at it. "Security," he said without turning around. The word landed heavy in the room. 2 uniformed guards near the doors shifted their weight, not moving yet, just preparing. Miguel felt it then, the shift, the moment where the room decided what he was. A disruption, a delay, a problem to be handled. "Sir," one of the guards said, approaching slowly, "you'll need to take your seat." Miguel didn't step back. "I'm not causing a disturbance," he said. "I'm trying to prevent one." That line earned a real laugh. The woman who laughed didn't cover her mouth. She didn't look embarrassed. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and looked at Miguel like he'd just told a joke meant for someone else. The chair glanced at the clock. All those in favor of proceeding with the vote as scheduled, he said, raising his hand. Please indicate. Miguel's breath caught. Wait, he said. The microphone was still off. He raised his voice just slightly. Please. A few hands went up, then more, slow, confident. Miguel looked around the room. Some faces avoided his eyes. Others watched him with open irritation as if he were holding up traffic. He caught his reflection in the dark surface of the table nearest him. He barely recognized himself. This was the same building he used to come to as a child holding his father's hand. The same chamber where his father had stood years ago speaking calmly, confidently. His name known, his voice welcomed. Back then, people had stood when his father entered. Now Miguel was standing and no one cared. If this story feels uncomfortably familiar to you, if you've ever been in a room where decisions were being made about you but never with you, you already understand what that silence feels like. You don't have to say it out loud. A lot of people listening right now know it too. Sir, the guard said again, closer now, you need to step aside. Miguel turned toward him. Do you know what that fund is? Miguel asked. The guard hesitated. It was built by men who worked nights, Miguel said. Men who lost fingers, backs, years. They paid into it so their families wouldn't be forgotten. That's enough, the chair snapped. Miguel looked back at the raised hands, counted them without meaning to. 3, 4, 5. One more and it would be done. He thought of his father sitting at the kitchen table late at night filling out forms by hand. He thought of the promise he'd made standing in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and quiet fear. Don't let them erase us. Miguel swallowed. I'm not asking for sympathy, he said, his voice breaking just slightly. Just enough for the guard to hear it. I'm asking for recognition. The chair didn't respond. He brought his gavel down once, sharp, final. The sound echoed through the chamber. Vote in progress, the chair said. Miguel felt something close in around him. Not panic, something colder. The guard placed a hand lightly on Miguel's arm. Sir, he said almost apologetically, you'll need to come with me. Miguel didn't resist. He didn't argue. He let himself be guided toward the aisle, his boots sounding too loud against the polished floor. As he passed the first row, someone looked up at him, then quickly away. Another person glanced at his folder, then at their phone. No one said his name. The screen at the front of the room updated. A tally appeared. Miguel saw it out of the corner of his eye. The vote was moving forward. If you're listening to this and wondering how often decisions like this happen without anyone noticing, without anyone stopping to ask who gets erased in the process, you're not alone in that thought. Stories like this don't usually make it into meeting minutes. They live in moments like this when someone is quietly escorted out while everyone else looks at the clock. The guard paused near the door. Just wait here, he said. Miguel stood there, the door closed behind him, the muffled sound of voices bleeding through the thick wood. He looked down at the folder in his hands. His father's name was printed on the top page. Still there, for now. Inside the chamber, another hand went up. Miguel stayed where the guard left him. The hallway outside the chamber was narrow, painted a dull beige that had probably been chosen because no one had strong feelings about it. A row of plastic chairs lined the wall, bolted to the floor. Empty. A bulletin board hung crooked nearby, covered in outdated notices and curling paper. From behind the closed door, voices bled through in fragments. Not words he could make out, just the sound of people continuing on with their day. He loosened his grip on the folder and flexed his fingers. They were stiff, not from nerves, from habit. Years of lifting, stacking, pulling, the kind of work that left marks no one noticed unless they were looking for them. Miguel wasn't angry yet. That would come later. Right now, what he felt was something quieter, heavier, the familiar weight of being reduced to background noise. A man walked past him down the hallway, glanced at him once, then kept going. No curiosity, no concern, just a quick assessment that decided Miguel didn't require attention. Miguel had seen that look his entire life. He leaned against the wall and let his shoulders drop slightly. Not in defeat, just to rest. The night shift had ended barely 3 hours ago. He hadn't gone home, hadn't slept. He'd come straight here, the smell of the warehouse still clinging to his clothes, no matter how carefully he'd washed his hands. He closed his eyes for a moment. The warehouse came back to him immediately. The low hum of machines, the echo of footsteps on concrete, The way the air changed at 4 in the morning, heavy and still like the world itself was holding its breath. That was where his father had spent most of his life. Carlos Alvarez, line supervisor, night crew. Carlos never talked about his work like it was something special. He talked about it like it was something necessary. Bills got paid. Families ate. That was the job. Miguel had grown up watching him come home just before sunrise, boots by the door jacket draped over the chair. Sometimes his father would sit at the kitchen table for a while, not because he had something to do, but because he needed a few minutes to become himself again before going to bed. You learn a lot about people at night, Carlos used to say. That's when no one's pretending. Miguel learned early how to stay quiet in the mornings, how to make his own breakfast, how to pack his own bag. His father slept during the day. Miguel respected that. Respect mattered in their house. It mattered at work, too. When the accident happened years before Miguel ever set foot in this building, Carlos had been the one who stayed behind, the one who didn't leave when everyone else did. He didn't talk about it afterward. Neither did the men who worked under him. They didn't need to. What came after was the fund. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't make headlines. A portion of overtime pay pooled together. A safety net for families when injuries happened or when men didn't come home at all. Carlos had pushed for it quietly, filled out forms at the kitchen table, asked questions at meetings most people skipped, made sure names were written down correctly. When he got sick years later, the fund was still there, still running, still helping. Until now. Miguel opened the folder again. He didn't need to read the papers. He knew them by heart. He'd memorized the language, the dates, the signatures, not because he enjoyed it, because no one else was going to. The designation was clear. The responsibility was his. He was not here out of sentiment. He was here because no one else could be. A door down the hall opened. 2 council aides stepped out talking quietly. One of them noticed Miguel and stopped. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asked. "I was asked to stand here," Miguel said. She glanced at the chamber door. "Oh," she said. Then after a pause, "The meeting's almost done." Miguel nodded. She didn't ask anything else. Didn't offer a seat. She turned and walked away. Almost done. The words settled into him. Inside the chamber, hands were still being raised. Papers still being shuffled. People still speaking into microphones. Outside, Miguel existed in the gap where decisions were made without him. He remembered another room, smaller, quieter. The hospital room where his father had spent his last weeks. Carlos hadn't been afraid. Not outwardly. He worried about practical things. Miguel's schedule, the bills, whether the truck needed work. On the last night, his voice had been weaker, but his eyes were clear. "They'll try to shut it down," Carlos said. "That fund costs them money." Miguel had sat forward. "They can't." Carlos had smiled faintly. "They will." "What do you want me to do?" Carlos had taken a breath. "You speak when they won't listen. You show up when they expect no one." Miguel had nodded then without understanding how heavy those words would become. A sharp sound came from behind the chamber door. Not loud enough to be a gavel. Something else. Movement. Miguel straightened. A guard stepped out different from the one who had escorted him earlier. Younger. Less sure of himself. "They're still voting," the guard said. "Just so you know." Miguel didn't thank him. Not because he was rude. Because there was nothing to thank. "Am I allowed back in?" Miguel asked. The guard hesitated. "Just long enough?" "I don't think so," he said. Miguel looked past him toward the closed door. "On what grounds?" The guard shifted his weight. "You're not on the list." Miguel almost smiled. "Neither was my father," he said. The first time. The guard didn't respond. He nodded once awkwardly and stepped away. Miguel was alone again. If you've ever been told without anyone saying it directly that your presence is an inconvenience, you know this feeling. It's not shouted. It's implied. It shows up in pauses, in avoided eye contact, in doors that close just a little too smoothly. People don't need to be cruel to make it clear you don't belong. Miguel checked the clock on the wall. 2 minutes had passed, maybe 3. He imagined the vote tally changing, one hand at a time. The fund wasn't just numbers. It was names. Men who had trusted the system enough to believe it would remember them. Miguel pushed off the wall and took a step toward the door. The guard immediately moved. "Sir," he said, "I really can't let you—" "I'm not trying to cause trouble," Miguel said. "I just need them to hear one thing." The guard's jaw tightened. He looked uncomfortable now. "Please," Miguel added, not pleading, asking. Inside the chamber, someone laughed. The sound slipped through the door like it didn't care who heard it. Miguel stopped. He understood then. They weren't ignoring him by accident. They had already decided who he was. Someone with a connection, not authority. Someone with feelings, not standing. Someone whose role was to accept what had been chosen for him. Miguel took a step back. He leaned against the wall again, the folder pressed flat against his chest. If you're listening to this and thinking about a time when you were present but unrecognized, when you were spoken over instead of spoken to, you don't need a dramatic confrontation to understand the damage that does. Sometimes the deepest injustice happens quietly, while everyone insists they're just following procedure. Inside the chamber, a voice rose, firm, confident. Miguel couldn't hear the words. He didn't need to. He watched the thin line of light at the bottom of the door, watched as shadows shifted behind it. Another minute passed, then another. Miguel adjusted his stance, grounding himself. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. The door handle moved. Miguel lifted his head. Someone was about to come out. He didn't know who. He didn't know why. But something in the air had changed. Not relief. Not hope. Just the sense that whatever was happening inside it was moving faster now, and that his absence was being counted as agreement. Miguel tightened his grip on the folder. He wasn't done standing here, and the room behind that door wasn't done with him whether it knew it or not. Miguel stayed by the door long enough that the guard stopped pretending to watch him. The hallway settled into a rhythm. Footsteps. A phone vibrating somewhere. The low hum of the building's ventilation. Everything functioning as intended, indifferent to the fact that something irreversible was happening a few feet away. Miguel checked the clock again. The second hand moved, steady, unconcerned. He thought about how many times he'd watched clocks like this before. Break rooms, loading docks, hospital waiting areas. Time always moved the same way no matter what it was carrying away with it. He shifted the folder from one hand to the other and opened it again, not to read, but to make sure the top page was still there. The designation letter, the one that named him as the representative. The one with the date stamped clearly at the bottom. Valid, current, ignored. A woman stepped out of the chamber and paused when she saw him. She was younger than most of the people inside. Her badge identified her as staff, not a council member. She hesitated, then walked over. "They're almost finished," she said quietly. Miguel looked at her, really looked this time. Finished with what he asked. She pressed her lips together. The vote. Miguel nodded once. "Has it passed?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. She glanced back at the door, then lowered her voice. "They're counting now." Miguel felt the words settle into his chest. Not sharply, dully. "Did anyone mention the representative designation?" he asked. She shook her head. "They said the fund hasn't been active," she replied. "That no one showed up." Miguel almost laughed. "I showed up," he said. She didn't disagree. She just looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said, and this time it sounded sincere. Miguel watched her walk away. "Sorry, didn't stop votes." He leaned his shoulder against the wall and closed his eyes just long enough for the image to form. His father standing at the edge of a work site, arms crossed, watching a new hire struggle with a task he'd done 1,000 times before. Carlos never took over right away. He waited. Let people figure things out. Stepped in only when it mattered. "They don't need saving," his father used to say. "They need a chance." Miguel opened his eyes. Inside the chamber, they weren't giving him one. A muffled voice carried through the door, louder than the others. Confident. Familiar. "The chair." All those opposed the voice said. Miguel stepped closer, his ear almost to the wood. Silence followed. Or maybe there were no voices raised. Either way, the pause was brief. "Motion carries," the chair said. Miguel straightened. Just like that. He waited for the door to open. For someone to come out and tell him it was done. That he was too late. That procedure had been followed. But nothing happened. Instead, another voice cut in. Not loud, not angry. "Excuse me." Miguel didn't recognize it. "There is a note here," the voice continued. "Regarding representation." Miguel's breath caught. The chair responded immediately. Sharp. That note was reviewed. "I don't believe it was," the other voice said. "It appears to have been filed last quarter." A pause followed, longer this time. Miguel pressed his palm flat against the door without realizing he'd moved. "That doesn't change the outcome," the chair said. "The individual in question is not present." Miguel swallowed. "I'm here," he said aloud, knowing they couldn't hear him. The hallway felt colder now. Or maybe that was just his body reacting to the thought that this might be it. that all the careful preparation, all the showing up, all the patience had been reduced to a technicality no one felt obligated to check. The guard returned his steps slower this time. "They're asking for a brief pause," he said. "Just stay here." Miguel studied his face. "Why?" he asked. The guard hesitated. "I don't know," he said. Someone raised a concern. Miguel nodded. That was all he needed. He stood there, back straight, folder tucked under his arm, the way his father used to stand when he knew a supervisor was about to make a bad call. Calm. Ready. Not backing away. Inside the chamber, voices overlapped. Not laughter this time. Short exchanges. Questions. The chair spoke again, lower now. "We're not reopening discussion," he said. "The deadline has passed." Miguel exhaled slowly through his nose. Deadlines. They mattered when they worked in your favor. When they didn't, they were treated like suggestions. The staff woman from earlier reappeared at the end of the hall. She didn't come closer. She just looked at Miguel and gave a small nod, barely noticeable. Something had changed. The door opened. Not all the way, just enough. The chair stepped out, adjusting his jacket. He glanced at Miguel as if noticing him for the first time. "You," he said. Miguel stepped forward. "Yes," he replied. The chair's expression was tight, controlled. "We have a question regarding your claim," he said. Miguel didn't smile. He didn't argue. "I have answers," he said. The chair studied him for a moment longer than necessary. "Come in," he said. Miguel walked past him and back into the chamber. The room felt different now, quieter, more alert. A few people avoided his eyes. Others watched him with something closer to interest. He took his place where he'd stood before. The chair didn't offer him the microphone. "State your name for the record," he said. Miguel did. "And your role," the chair added. Miguel lifted the folder and set it on the desk in front of him. "I am the designated representative for the Alvarez Workers Fund," he said. "Registered and current." The chair glanced at the folder, then at the clerk. "Verify," he said. The clerk began flipping through pages. Miguel waited. No speeches, no explanations, just the truth placed where it belonged. If you've ever watched someone scramble to correct a decision they were confident in just moments earlier, you know how quickly authority can shift when facts are finally acknowledged. It doesn't announce itself. It tightens. It recalculates. The clerk stopped flipping. She looked up. "Yes," she said. "He's listed." The chair didn't respond right away. Miguel stood there, the weight of the room pressing in from all sides, and felt something settle into place. Not victory, not yet. Just the knowledge that he existed on the record now, and that whatever came next, it would no longer be possible to pretend he hadn't been there all along. When Miguel stepped back inside the room, did not welcome him. It tolerated him. That was the difference. Chairs shifted. Papers stopped moving. The low murmur that usually filled the space went quiet in an uneven way, like people weren't sure what reaction was appropriate anymore. The chair remained standing, not to greet him, to maintain control. "State your objection," he said, briefly. Miguel didn't reach for the microphone. He didn't wait for permission. The vote was called while the registered representative was physically present and denied the opportunity to speak. He said, "That invalidates the process." Invalidates. The words landed differently than his earlier ones. These weren't emotional. They weren't personal. They were cold, precise. A man 2 seats to the chair's right scoffed. "That's a stretch," he said. He was late. Miguel turned his head slightly toward him. "I arrived before the vote was called," Miguel said. "I was told to wait." By whom, the man asked, already smiling, already confident the answer wouldn't matter. Miguel didn't look at him. "By your staff," he said, "right outside." The staff woman stiffened in her seat. The chair cleared his throat. "This council is not required to accommodate every representative who doesn't look like one," Miguel finished quietly. The room reacted all at once. Not outrage, not denial. Discomfort. The chair's eyes sharpened. "Watch your tone," he said. Miguel met his gaze. "I am," he replied. A few people shifted again. Someone tapped a pen against the table and stopped when they realized how loud it sounded. The clerk spoke hesitant. "The designation is valid," she said. "It was filed correctly." The chair nodded once, controlled. "That may be," he said. "But the deadline for public comment has passed." Miguel inhaled. "This isn't public comment," he said. "This is representation." The chair didn't respond immediately. He glanced around the room, searching for support. He found it in the familiar places, in the folded arms, the knowing looks, the subtle nods from people who had already decided how this should end. "Let's not overcomplicate this," another council member said. "The fund hasn't been active in years." Miguel turned toward him. "My father died 2 years ago," he said. "That doesn't mean his work stopped mattering." A woman near the front rolled her eyes. "This is turning into a family matter," she said. We have policy for a reason. Miguel felt the heat again. He kept it contained. This fund exists because policy failed, he said. It exists because men were injured and forgotten. That's not relevant, the chair snapped. Miguel nodded slowly. Then neither is your vote. The chair's jaw tightened. You don't get to dictate relevance in this room, he said. Miguel didn't raise his voice. No, he said. But I get to insist on procedure. That word landed harder than anything else he'd said so far. Procedure. The clerk shifted again. She glanced at the chair, then back at the paperwork in front of her. There is a clause, she said quietly, regarding active representation. The chair shot her a look. We're aware of the clause, he said. Then you're also aware, she continued, that a vote cannot proceed while a registered representative is denied the floor. Silence. This time it wasn't awkward, it was sharp. The man who had laughed earlier leaned back in his chair. You're really going to derail this over him? He asked. Miguel looked at him. You already did? Miguel said, when you assumed I didn't belong here. That earned him a few looks, not friendly ones. The chair straightened his jacket. We will allow 2 minutes, he said, no more. Miguel nodded. He didn't thank him. He stepped forward, finally reaching for the microphone. It was on now. No click. No interruption. He didn't waste time. My father worked the night shift for 28 years, Miguel said. He helped create this fund because men were getting hurt, and their families were left with nothing. A council member sighed loudly. Miguel kept going. He didn't ask for recognition, he asked for continuity. The chair tapped his pen once. Focus, he said. I am Miguel replied. You're voting to dissolve something you didn't build. The pen stopped tapping. Miguel glanced around the room. He met a few eyes. Some looked away. Some stared back, expressionless. This fund isn't inactive, Miguel said. It's inconvenient. That's enough, the chair said. Miguel paused, just long enough. You don't want to hear this, Miguel said, because hearing it means admitting the process failed. The chair stood abruptly. Time, he said. Miguel stepped back from the microphone. I wasn't finished, he said. You were given an opportunity, the chair replied. Miguel looked at the raised hands again. Counted them, fewer this time. He saw uncertainty now, small, fragile, but present. The clerk spoke again, firmer now. There's an issue, she said. The vote was called before verification was completed. The chair's face went still. What issue, he asked. The representative designation, she said. It wasn't acknowledged on record. A murmur spread through the room. Miguel felt it the shift he'd been waiting for. Not in his favor yet, but away from certainty. The chair glanced at the screen, then at the clerk. We can note it retroactively, he said. The clerk shook her head. That's not standard. The chair's voice dropped. Are you questioning my authority? She swallowed. I'm stating procedure. Miguel watched this exchange without moving, without speaking. This wasn't his moment to push. It was his moment to let them unravel themselves. The man who had scoffed earlier leaned forward. This is getting ridiculous, he said. We're letting one person hold up an entire council. Miguel turned to him slowly. You're not being held up, Miguel said. You're being asked to pause. The man laughed again, short, sharp. By who, he asked. You? Miguel met his eyes. Yes, he said. The room went quiet again. Not because of the answer, because of the certainty in it. The chair looked down at his notes, then back up. We will take a brief recess, he said. Miguel didn't relax. He didn't sit. He stood where he was, the folder resting on the desk in front of him. His father's name still visible on the top page. The council members began to talk among themselves. Low voices, tight clusters. Miguel felt the familiar sensation return, not exclusion this time, but scrutiny. He had moved from invisible to inconvenient, from inconvenient to disruptive, and now finally to something they couldn't ignore. He glanced once toward the door he'd been escorted through earlier. The hallway beyond it felt farther away now. Inside the chamber, the chair spoke again, quieter than before. Bring in the clerk's file, he said. Miguel kept his eyes forward. He didn't know what they would decide, but he knew one thing. They were no longer laughing. The clerk returned with a thicker file. It wasn't dramatic. No rush, no announcement. She placed it on the desk in front of the chair and stepped back. Hands folded, eyes forward. The room waited. The chair opened the file slowly, as if speed might give something away. He scanned the first page, then the next. His expression didn't change, but the muscles along his jaw tightened. Miguel watched without moving. This was the part no one had prepared for. The man who had laughed earlier leaned over, trying to catch a glimpse of the paperwork. What is it? He asked. The chair didn't answer. He turned another page. The clerk cleared her throat. There's an addendum, she said, filed after the last audit. The chair looked up sharply. Why wasn't this flagged? It was, she replied. It was marked for review. By whom? The clerk hesitated. By your office. The room went still. Miguel felt it before he understood it. The subtle shift. The way people stopped leaning back in their chairs. The way eyes returned to the center desk, no longer bored. The chair straightened. Read it, he said. The clerk nodded and began, her voice steady but careful. Designation of representation, she read. In the event of dissolution proceedings, authority is transferred to the named successor. She paused. Miguel's pulse picked up. Name, the chair said. The clerk glanced up once, then back down. Carlos Alvarez, she read. Primary. Miguel Alvarez, secondary. A murmur moved through the room. Not loud, but unmistakable. The chair looked at Miguel again. This time there was no dismissal in his eyes, only calculation. That's your father, he asked. Yes, Miguel said. And he's deceased. Yes. The chair nodded once. So you're saying... I'm not saying anything, Miguel replied. The file is. That earned him a few looks, some sharp, some surprised. The woman who had rolled her eyes earlier leaned forward, now her expression guarded. Even if that's accurate, she said, this fund hasn't been active. Miguel turned to her. It paid out 6 months ago, he said. To a family whose name you approved. She blinked. That's not possible, she said. Miguel didn't argue. He looked at the clerk instead. The clerk flipped through the file again. It did, she said. There was a claim processed. The woman sat back, her mouth tight. The man who had scoffed earlier rubbed his chin. Well, he said this is unexpected. Miguel didn't respond. He didn't need to. The chair leaned back in his seat. For the first time since Miguel had entered the room, he looked unsure. This still doesn't explain why no one was notified, he said. Miguel kept his voice level. Notified of what? That the fund was still in use. Miguel met his gaze. You were, he said. You just didn't read it. The chair's eyes flicked back to the file. Silence stretched. Then someone in the back row stood. She was older, smaller, dressed plainly. Miguel hadn't noticed her before. She hadn't spoken, hadn't raised her hand. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling slightly, but I need to say something. The chair frowned. This is not the... My husband worked under Carlos Alvarez, she said. He lost his hand on the night shift. That fund helped us keep our house. Every head turned toward her. Miguel felt his chest tighten. I didn't know this vote was happening, she continued. I only came because I saw his name on the agenda. The chair hesitated. This is highly irregular, he said. So was erasing us, she replied. The room didn't laugh this time. The chair looked at Miguel again. How many more, he asked. Miguel answered without hesitation. Enough, he said. The chair glanced around the room. At the faces that no longer looked bored. At the clerk still holding the file open. At the woman standing, hands clasped tightly in front of her. He inhaled slowly. We will suspend the vote, he said. The words landed hard. A few people reacted immediately. Others stayed still as if waiting to see if he would take it back. Pending further review, the chair added. Miguel didn't smile. He didn't relax. Suspended wasn't resolved, but it wasn't erased either. The chair brought the gavel down once, not sharply, deliberately. This session is in recess, he said. Chairs scraped. Papers shuffled. Voices rose, confused, overlapping. Miguel remained where he was. The woman who had spoken approached him slowly. Your father, she said quietly. He used to bring coffee for everyone, even when it wasn't his turn. Miguel nodded. He said it helped people stay awake, he replied. She smiled faintly, then stepped away. The chair gathered his papers, avoiding Miguel's eyes. As the room emptied, Miguel stood alone again, but this time it felt different. He wasn't invisible. He wasn't being escorted out. They were stepping around him now, carefully. Miguel looked down at the folder in front of him. His father's name was still there, and this time no one pretended not to see it. The recess didn't feel like a break. It felt like people had stepped outside to decide what version of the truth they could live with. Miguel stayed where he was. He didn't sit. He didn't pace. He rested both hands on the edge of the desk, the folder still open, his father's name visible in plain black ink. Not highlighted, not emphasized, just there. The clerk returned first. She moved differently now. Slower. More deliberate. She avoided eye contact with the chair and went straight to her station. One by one, the council members filtered back in. Some talked quietly among themselves. Others avoided conversation entirely. The man who had laughed earlier didn't take his seat right away. He stood behind his chair, scrolling through his phone, his jaw tight. The chair entered last. He didn't speak immediately. He adjusted his jacket, pulled his chair back, and sat down. He looked older now, not physically, structurally, like the room had added weight to his shoulders without asking. We are back on record, he said. The clerk nodded and marked the time. The chair folded his hands. Before we proceed, he said there are procedural matters that need to be addressed. Miguel listened. This was the tone he recognized. Not defensive, not dismissive. Careful. The Alvarez Workers' Fund. The chair continued was scheduled for dissolution based on inactivity. Miguel said nothing. New information has been presented, the chair said. Information that suggests the fund remains active and properly represented. He glanced toward the clerk. Is that correct? Yes, she replied. The designation is valid. The fund has recent activity. The chair nodded slowly. Miguel watched the man's face as the words settled in. Watched him process the shift. Authority recalculating itself in real time. A council member cleared his throat. Mr. Chair, he said, are we saying the earlier vote is void? The chair paused. Yes, he said. That is what I'm saying. The room reacted in fragments. A sharp inhale here. A chair shifting there. The man with the phone finally sat down, his expression unreadable. Miguel felt the weight in his chest loosen slightly. Not relief. Not yet. Recognition. The vote was called prematurely, the chair continued. And without acknowledgement of a registered representative, Miguel kept his gaze forward. I will take responsibility for that oversight. The word hung in the air. Oversight. Miguel had learned a long time ago that some words were used to soften damage. But even soften this one mattered. We will reopen discussion, the chair said. Limited to the issue of dissolution. Miguel raised his hand. Not urgently, not dramatically. The chair looked at him. Yes, he said. Miguel spoke evenly. My father believed that if something existed to protect people, it should not disappear quietly, he said. Not without being challenged. The chair nodded once. You may continue. Miguel didn't rush. This fund was created because men were hurt doing work that benefited this city, he said. Not because it was profitable, because it was right. A council member leaned forward. And how long do you expect this to continue? She asked. Indefinitely. Miguel met her gaze. As long as the work continues, he said. As long as people still get injured. As long as families still need it. Another member spoke. And who oversees it now? I do, Miguel said. As my father did before me. The chair glanced at the clerk. Is that supported by the documentation? Yes, she replied. The man who had laughed earlier shifted in his seat. So one person can hold up the council, he asked. Based on a family legacy. Miguel turned toward him. This isn't about legacy, he said. It's about obligation. The man scoffed. To whom? Miguel answered without hesitation. To the people who were promised this wouldn't be taken from them without a voice. Silence followed. Not awkward, not hostile. Intent. The chair folded his hands again. Given the information presented, he said the motion to dissolve the Alvarez Workers' Fund is withdrawn. The words landed quietly. No gavel, no announcement. Just a statement. Miguel exhaled slowly. The chair continued. Further review will be conducted regarding the handling of this agenda item. Miguel looked up. By whom, he asked. The chair met his gaze. By this council, he said, and by the Oversight Committee. The clerk's pen paused. Miguel nodded once. That was new. The chair glanced around the room. Is there any objection to this course of action? No hands went up, not even halfway. The man with the phone stared straight ahead. The woman who had rolled her eyes earlier avoided looking at Miguel entirely. The chair picked up his gavel. This matter is concluded, he said. Miguel didn't move. He waited. The chair hesitated, then looked at him again. Mr. Alvarez, he said. Miguel stepped forward. You may remain for the remainder of the session, the chair said. As a recognized representative. Miguel nodded. Thank you, he said. The words weren't soft. They weren't grateful. They were factual. He took a seat near the front. Not because he wanted to, because it was now his place. The room continued on with other matters. Budgets, timelines, items that had nothing to do with him. But Miguel felt it the way eyes flicked toward him now. The way people recalculated what he was allowed to be. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't convenient. He was on record. As the meeting moved forward, Miguel rested his hands on the folder in his lap. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. His father had taught him that some victories didn't come with noise. They came with silence, the kind that followed when people realized they could no longer pretend something didn't exist. Miguel looked once toward the back of the room. The woman who had spoken earlier met his eyes and nodded. Small, certain. He nodded back. The chair called the next item on the agenda. Life moved on. But something in the room had shifted. And this time it wasn't moving without him. The meeting ended without ceremony. People stood. Chairs slid back. Papers were gathered. The room returned to motion, but not to normal. Not yet. Miguel remained seated for a moment longer than necessary, not because he was tired, because he was watching. He watched who avoided him. He watched who hesitated, then nodded. He watched who spoke his name for the first time carefully as if testing whether it would hold. Mr. Alvarez. He looked up. The chair was standing beside his desk, now holding a thin stack of papers, not the thick file from before. Something else. You'll be receiving a formal notice, the chair said, regarding the review. Miguel nodded. I'll read it, he said. The chair hesitated. For what it's worth, he added, lowering his voice, this should have been handled differently. Miguel met his eyes. It usually is, Miguel said, just not for people like us. The chair didn't argue. He nodded once and walked away. Miguel gathered his folder and stood. As he moved toward the exit, someone stepped into his path. The man who had laughed earlier. Up close, he looked smaller, not physically, narrower, like someone whose confidence had depended on a room agreeing with him. You didn't have to make it uncomfortable, the man said quietly. Miguel looked at him. I didn't, he replied. I made it accurate. The man pressed his lips together. This isn't over, he said. Miguel nodded. I know, he said. That's kind of the point. Outside the chamber, the hallway felt brighter. Not because the lights had changed, but because Miguel wasn't being escorted anymore. People walked past him differently now. Some nodded, some looked away. Some stopped and asked questions they should have asked earlier. Is the fund really still active? How many families are affected? Will there be another vote? Miguel answered simply. Yes, enough. There shouldn't be. By the time he reached the front doors, voices were already rising outside. Not shouting, talking, curious, alert. A reporter turned as he stepped out. Sir, she called, moving toward him. Can we ask you a few questions? Miguel stopped. He didn't look for approval. He didn't look back. Yes, he said. The camera came up, but he didn't react to it. He'd spent his life being watched without being heard. This felt different. What happened in there? The reporter asked. Miguel answered plainly. They tried to dissolve a workers' fund without acknowledging the person responsible for it, he said. When that person spoke, they had to stop. Why today, she asked. Why now? Miguel paused. Because today, he said, someone finally checked the record. The clip ran that afternoon, then again that evening. By the next morning, it wasn't just a clip, it was a story. Former workers started calling. Families who had received help from the fund. People who had assumed it no longer existed because no one talked about it. A local paper published a headline that didn't use Miguel's name at all. City Council halts vote after procedural failure. Miguel didn't mind. The next article went further. Questions raised over attempted dissolution of Workers' Fund. By the third day, the language changed again. Oversight Committee launches. Review into Council conduct. Miguel read the articles in the quiet of his kitchen, the same table where his father used to sit filling out forms late at night. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt steady. The calls kept coming. An older man with a shaking voice thanked him for not letting the fund disappear quietly. A woman asked if her husband's case would still be covered. A former supervisor admitted he'd assumed the fund was gone years ago. Miguel told them all the same thing. It's still here. The Oversight Committee moved faster than anyone expected. Records were reviewed, timelines examined, emails questioned. Not because Miguel demanded it, but because too many people had seen what happened to ignore it. The chair issued a statement. Short, careful, full of words like oversight and process improvement. 2 council members recused themselves from further review. 1 resigned. Miguel didn't comment on any of it. He went back to work that night. The warehouse was the same. The air, the noise, the rhythm. But the men who worked beside him looked at him differently now. Not impressed. Recognizing. You stood up there, one of them said during break. Didn't back down. Miguel shrugged. Someone had to, he said. Weeks passed. The fund was reaffirmed. Its terms clarified. Its existence formally acknowledged on record. Miguel attended the final session where the review was closed. This time his name was on the agenda. Spelled correctly. No one laughed. When the chair announced the findings, his voice was measured. Mistakes were made, he said. They will not be repeated. Miguel watched the room as the words landed. Some people looked relieved. Others looked irritated. Miguel felt neither. After the session, the clerk approached him. I should have said something sooner, she said. Miguel nodded. You did when it counted, he replied. She smiled faintly. Outside the city moved the way it always did. Cars, people, noise, indifference. Miguel stood on the steps for a moment, looking out at it all. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "My father worked nights, too, thank you." Miguel stared at the screen longer than necessary, then put the phone away. He didn't know how far this would go, how many changes would stick, how many wouldn't. But he knew this. The fund wasn't erased. His father wasn't forgotten. And the room that once pretended he didn't exist would never be able to do that again, not without someone remembering the moment they tried and failed. Miguel didn't return to the council building right away after that last session. There was no need. The vote was documented. The review was closed. The fund's status was clear. Clear enough that it no longer depended on whether anyone felt like listening. Life resumed its shape. Night shifts, early mornings, coffee that went cold before he remembered to drink it. The difference was subtle, but it followed him. At work, people stopped explaining things to him twice. When questions came up about schedules or coverage, someone would look at Miguel first, not because he was in charge, but because they assumed he'd know what to do. Recognition has a quiet sound. It doesn't announce itself. One afternoon, Miguel visited the small storage room where the fund's physical records were kept. He didn't do anything special. He didn't reorganize them. He didn't add labels. He checked that everything was there intact and put the folder back where it belonged. He locked the door and left. That was enough. Weeks later, a letter arrived at his apartment. Official. Plain. No apology inside. Just confirmation. The fund would continue. Oversight would be added. No future changes without a registered representative present. Miguel read it once and placed it in the same folder he'd carried into the chamber. On the back of the envelope, his father's handwriting caught his eye. An old note Carlos had scribbled years ago, reused paper, folded too many times. "Keep copies, show up." Miguel smiled once, briefly. The city never held a press conference about the Workers' Fund. It wasn't that kind of story. It didn't fit neatly into a headline after the initial attention faded. That didn't bother Miguel. What mattered happened quietly. A claim was processed without delay. A family didn't have to argue for coverage. A question was answered without being dismissed. One evening, Miguel sat at the same kitchen table he'd grown up with, the surface worn smooth in places where his father used to rest his arms. He thought about how close it had all come to disappearing, how easily it could have. If you're listening to this, and you've ever wondered how many decisions are made without the people most affected even being acknowledged, you're not imagining it. Sometimes systems don't fail loudly. They fail politely. They fail while everyone insists nothing personal is happening. Miguel didn't become a public figure. He didn't run for anything. He didn't seek recognition. He kept showing up. Months later, during another council meeting, a new agenda item appeared. Minor, procedural. But this time a line had been added underneath it. Representative present. Miguel noticed it before anyone else did. The clerk noticed him noticing and gave a small nod. That was enough. On his way out of the building that day, a man he didn't recognize stopped him near the steps. "I watched that meeting," the man said. "The first one, online." Miguel nodded. "I didn't think people like us were allowed in rooms like that." The man continued. Miguel considered his words carefully. "They don't allow it," he said. "They count on you not insisting." The man nodded slowly, like something had settled. As Miguel walked away, he thought about how many people had felt the same thing, that sense of being present but unacknowledged, necessary but invisible. If this story sounds familiar, if it reminds you of a moment when you were dismissed before you were heard, there's space for that here. Other people listening are carrying the same memory, even if they've never said it out loud. Miguel unlocked his car and sat for a moment before starting it. The city hummed around him. Ordinary. Unimpressed. He didn't mind. The fund was still there. The record was intact. And the next time someone tried to erase it quietly, there would be no confusion about who was allowed to speak. Miguel started the engine and pulled into traffic, blending back into the flow of people who did the work that kept everything else moving. Somewhere inside the building behind him, a document remained exactly where it had been placed, on the record.